What's up, y'all? My name is Travis Handler. I'm the chair for Dental Leadership Educators. I'm here with another session of On the Way Up, our interview series. Again, I'm super stoked for our guest this week. Adia Reed is a sexual assault prevention ambassador at the University of Southern Mississippi. Adia, thank you for being on. I'll start by just real easy having you kind of go through your life story. Introduce yourself a little bit.
Hi, I'm Adia Reed. I was born in New Orleans, moved to Jackson after Hurricane Katrina, lived with my dad for a while, moved high schools. I went to a very rural public school, elementary, middle school. Then I moved to St. Andrews, which is where I met Travis. I graduated from St. Andrews in 2017, and now I'm at University of Southern Mississippi. I'm in my 5th year, taking a little victory lap. I'm majoring in criminal justice, and I'm minoring in human rights.
Awesome. And just to be clear, that is Jackson, Mississippi.
Yeah, sorry, Jackson, Mississippi.
No, it's okay. I don't think there's another Jackson, but just to be clear. Okay, so I guess actually the first question for you said criminology?
Criminal justice, yeah.
Criminal justice with an emphasis in human rights. So you want to talk a little bit before we get into the work you do with sexual assault prevention. I am curious as to how you decided to study that.
I knew from a very young age that whatever I wanted to do would be centered around the law. I grew up watching all those crime shows like Law and Order, Law and Order SVU. I started watching that in 4th grade when I probably should not have been watching Law and Order SVU. But having a single dad kind of means he doesn't know what parental controls are. So grew up watching that, CSI, just all of those, and that obviously piqued my interest. But my dad always, and not just my dad, but my family in general, always made it a point to tell me, like, it's not like that in real life. And I think they kind of expected that to, like, make me not as interested. But then I was just like, now I want to know what the real thing is. Like, I want to know more about it. So I've been into that since high school. And then when I got here and started studying all of that, it was like just absolutely insane. I did change my minor a few times. First it was political science, and then it was legal studies, and honestly those were just boring to me, and I wasn't getting as much as I wanted to out of it. I didn't even know that Southern Miss offered a human rights minor until the start of my junior year. And actually, I don't know. I added that minor like a few semesters ago, so who knows. But did that, and that is the ballpark that I was looking for. So with all of the stuff that I'm studying, it's very frustrating and makes me very kind of angry sometimes. But at the same time, that's a motivation to keep learning it, because the way that I look at it, whenever I learn something that really doesn't sit well with me, I just have to kind of turn it around and say, like, oh, how am I going to make this better once I get into the position where I can start doing things, if that makes sense. So it's all kind of come full circle. I don't know if that really makes sense.
No, that's absolutely perfect. And that's actually, I think, a fantastic segue into what you do as a sexual assault prevention ambassador on campus. So do you want to talk first a little bit just about kind of y'all's mission on campus, what you're seeking to do?
So SAPA was founded at Southern Miss in 2017. The founder's name is Selma Newbill. She is absolutely amazing. She just graduated from Southern Miss back in May, and she is actually working in DC as a victim advocate. She's doing a lot of cool things in DC. She actually just got interviewed for a news piece, I think. So she started all of that, and she was assaulted on campus her freshman year as well. And she realized after that there were no student-led organizations on campus, because we had Title IX and we have the counseling center, but my freshman year was so much different than it is right now in terms of like resources for sexual assault and the topic of sexual assault. It was not talked about. It wasn't mentioned, which makes me happy now that it will not happy if that happens to someone. But if and when that happens, there are so many more resources readily available now. But anyway, Selma saw that there wasn't any, so she started her own. And the group started out with like 5 or 6 members. And I just checked the group me before this. Now we're at 140 members. So, and last year, SAPA won Organization of the Year, I believe, or New Organization of the Year. She really took this little baby, planted a seed, and it is one of the most well-known groups on campus now, which is amazing. She's in the Hall of Fame at Southern Miss now. She got an award named after her, literally like the Selma Newbill Pursuit of Knowledge Award. So lots and lots of love to Selma. But so I went and got a copy of the Constitution, the SAPA Constitution, just to be sure. But so the official statement. SAPA is comprised of students whose mission is to promote and facilitate discussion among peers regarding the issues of sexual misconduct. So the overall goal is to help prevent sexual assault and other forms of sexual misconduct while also educating students about healthy relationships, consent, and all of USM's policies and resources, because it can be confusing. I went through a Title IX trial a couple years ago, and we can get back to that later. But it is confusing, and you don't really know where to go. So SAPA makes it a point to make those resources known and to make everybody know, like, if anything happens to you on campus, we are here.
No, absolutely. That was fantastic and incredibly comprehensive. And one of the things that I do want to touch on before we get into kind of your personal story is one of the things I heard emphasized in the Constitution is to host a conversation, right? To have a back and forth. Why do you think that that's a more useful way to present this information, as a conversation rather than y'all lecturing or leading a workshop, stuff like that?
So just to put in some criminal justice background, there's really no good deterrent for sexual misconduct, like in terms of punishment. The laws don't make it easy. Rape culture doesn't make it easy. Like, none of it is easy in terms of punishment, because we've seen by now, like, punishment doesn't do much. Scare tactics, like, oh, if you do this, this will happen. It doesn't do much because pretty much everyone knows that not much is going to happen, if that makes sense. So instead, it's more geared towards educating and doing it in a way that does make you kind of confront the uncomfortable things, but in a way that doesn't make you feel crappy about it, if that makes sense. So SAPA does, they do presentations with all the fraternities on campus, or any student-led organization in general, to talk about, consent, healthy relationships, like red flags, domestic violence, all of the sort. But starting those conversations and keep not just a one-time thing, but making it a regular thing and something that you can't really escape from the conversation on campus is sort of, I don't want to say a deterrent, but I don't know how to put this. Like, these conversations open your eyes a little bit more than just, oh, if you do this, then you'll get expelled from school. Oh, if you do this, blah, 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 blah. It really makes you dig into the things about yourself, even if you're a woman, like, because I know a lot of men get uncomfortable, like, having to face the fact that, oh, I might have made a woman uncomfortable at some point in their life. But also, when you're a woman, you have to face the fact that you've made people uncomfortable in your life too. And it's just this deep thinking and kind of making you do mental jumping jacks that ends up being more effective than just, oh, let's put down the hammer and blah, 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 blah. Because just in the whole grand scheme of things, punishment is not going to get rid of sexual assault or sexual misconduct. It would have by now if it works, but it's not going to.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. And what it sounds like to me is what you're kind of saying is the point of this prevention education format is almost like when you focus on the punishment side, you're putting a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. And what y'all are seeking to do with prevention work is to stop that hemorrhaging before it even starts.
Exactly.
Um, and so with that being said, can you talk a little bit about why you chose to get into this work in the first place?
Yeah. So 2 months into my freshman year, I was sexually assaulted on campus at a Greek life event. And that, like, after that, it was just my freshman year. It was almost like a blur. Um, I was essentially kicked out of my sorority um, for lying. The girls in my sorority thought that I was lying so I wouldn't get in trouble for my behavior of the night. So that kind of sucks. You know, I was supposed to have a whole sisterhood and I was ostracized and then had my name kind of, people lied and said, you know, oh, the reason she's not in Pi Phi anymore is because she wasn't abiding by our stand or no, our values. She wasn't a real, like, you know, just stuff like that. So that kind of had me feeling very, very alone for a while. And then about a year later, I I was with my mom in Jackson, and I had a pretty bad anxiety attack that should not have, you know, it was just a minor little thing that made me explode, as you know, happens pretty frequently with people who experience trauma. But my mom was like, you know, you're obviously not okay. So she literally sat me down, and she had a friend that worked at the USM Counseling Center. So she called her and was like, Dina, I might not have said her, but she was like, Adia's gonna talk to you right now. And literally handed me the phone and was like, she pretty much forced me to say, like, oh, I need help. And at the time, that sucked, but I'm so glad that I did it, because after not even 2 sessions, I think it was on the second session with Dina, she, I don't want to say convinced me because it wasn't like coercion or whatever, but she gave me the confidence to report it to the UPD, to UPD on campus. So we went from her office, walked next door to the UPD building. I met with the chief of UPD, Rusty Keys. He's absolutely amazing. And they took my statement, and that, before he even started taking my statement, he told me that no matter what happened to me, he believed me. And and that, like, hearing that was just like, holy crap. Because watching all of these shows, first of all, and studying this stuff, cops aren't typically trained to deal with victim or survivors of really any sort. They don't get that type of training. So I was terrified to even go there. And so for him to say that to me first, oh, I believe you, before I even got into it, that was like the starting point of become up, if you will. And then I reported it to Title IX, and it took a minute for that investigation to really start. That's what really kind of sucks about Title IX. Title IX does so many good things, but there's so much bureaucratic red tape, a lot of politics where politics shouldn't be involved. So the Title IX investigation did last for nearly a year. I reported it in November of 2018, and the investigation didn't finish, and he didn't receive his punishment until the next August. So he was suspended for 2 months, which I was shocked that he even got that, because his dad is acting dean of the business school at USM. He took that job in the middle of the Title IX investigation. I don't know if it had anything to do with me, but took that job smack dab in the middle of it. So I was like, no, nothing's going to happen. But he did get suspended for 2 years. However, he's still out on campus, still participated in events with his fraternity. So it was sort of like, I don't really know. I took that semester off after that. Wasn't really my decision fully. A lot of stuff happened with my tuition, but I did need that semester off. That semester, like, that's exactly what I needed. And then it wasn't until last year that I joined SAPA. So it was like this whole year had gone by after the Title IX, and the Title IX trial or investigation really brought up a lot of old wounds. And it did make me feel good, but in a way still made me feel alone. And not SAPA, Selma reached out to me last summer because she had seen where my TikTok went viral on accident. And she reached out to me and just told me how inspiring that I was to her. And I was like, Selma Newville is telling me that I'm inspiring. And she convinced me to join, and I wish I would have done it so much earlier. Like I had been considering it for years, and I was like, no, I can't do it, because part of that, like him being so involved on campus, like his family having such deep roots in Hattiesburg into Southern Miss, did keep me away from wanting to branch out and join groups, because even when he was suspended, because it's like, oh, what if they know me? Like, what if they know who I am? And a lot of people on campus do know who I am because of that, and that can get a little overwhelming. But joining SAPA was 100% the best decision that I have made at Southern Miss, and seeing how everyone, how to put this, seeing other people go through the same thing that I did, like feeling alone, and then coming into SAPA and then just being overwhelmed with this love and acceptance, and finally being surrounded by like not just like-minded people, but people who share your experiences and are advocating for the same thing. That's kind of what helped me get my power back, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for being willing to be candid there. And so now transitioning, I guess, a little bit into your responsibilities. What sort of leadership skills does being an advocate in your position require, or an ambassador? I apologize.
It does require a lot of patience, and like I think that's really the main thing, is patience. Um, and it's very important to do everything from an intersectional standpoint. And like, how do I put this? Okay, here, I'll start this way. In SAPA, we don't have a set like political affiliation or anything. Like anybody can join. I really do. I'm like stumped on this question. I'm trying to figure out. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, and we can always come back to it too. But I was just asking, what sort of leadership skills does being a sexual assault advocate require? You know, what skills do you think are important for leaders that are in that position, in those types of positions?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, like I said, patience, because it's frustrating to see, like it seems when you're teaching when you're leading these discussions, it sort of seems like it should be common sense. You know, people should know not to do this, but they don't. A lot of people don't, and it's really hard to have to come to that realization and be like, oh, I have to get over the fact that these people don't know this, and just bite the bullet and be the one to let them know. And that takes a lot of patience, and it takes a lot of determination, I think. And another thing is like being in tune with your emotions, because this is hard work. Like, because I know there are people in SAPA that have not had to deal with any like sort of sexual violence. I mean, sexual harassment is so rampant, but anyway, it's hard to hear these things. It's hard to, and especially if you've been through them, it can be very, very triggering. And sometimes you just kind of want to play like a Vampire Diaries move and cut your emotions off and just like not feel anything. I've come close to that. I might have succeeded at some point, but repressing that doesn't help you get the job done. And so I think that's another thing that I really had to learn, like in the year since I've been here, is like, don't push it down, don't suppress it, because a lot of the time that anger and that sadness and that frustration can be turned into something good, like into this drive, but you can't let it control you. It's like finding the healthy balance of letting yourself feel your emotions, but not letting them control you, or just repressing them altogether. And that's difficult. It takes a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of being real with yourself or having other people be real with you when you can't be real with yourself, and it's uncomfortable. So you need to be ready to listen to things that make you uncomfortable and learn from it, and then apply that to your daily life. And that's a struggle. It's like a, I said this earlier, it's like mental jumping jacks all day long. And but like it helps. I mean, yeah, it helps.
Awesome. No, that was super, super great. And I guess one thing I do want to come back to is why is some sort of exposure to prevention work like this important for any leaders on campus, anybody in any sort of position of leadership? Why is it important for them to understand this prevention framework?
Um, it sets an example, but it also does more than that. It sets a precedent. Um, and bringing in some criminal justice, because I literally just had a quiz on this like last week. So if we think about precedent in terms like legal terms, you know, lower courts have to abide by the precedent of the higher courts and follow those same sort of like legal guidelines if it applies to their case. And that's how I see the precedent with this on any campus. It's sort of like setting the standard, setting the new standards, if you will, like saying, this is what we're doing now. This is how we have changed, or how we've changed how we do things, how we've changed how we look at everything, and this is what we're doing from now on. Like that, like now we're doing this, and nothing like anything less than that is not going to work anymore. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. So in other words, in order to actually create buy-in on campus, it's almost impossible to do this without having people at the top levels, yeah, partake in this.
Sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, no, you're good.
Like in with SAPA specifically, like getting like in the early years, like getting the exposure from SGA or from Greek Life or from like Title IX, like these big organizations, that is what helped SAPA grow too. And now SAPA is doing, like they do presentations with all the fraternities, like once a semester about like boundaries and consent. And SAPA does require its members to go through Green Dot training, which is a bystander intervention training. I did that. I had to do that for one of my criminal justice classes before I joined SAPA, but I've used so much of not just the Green Dot training, but all the training that I've gotten from SAPA in everyday life. And when those trainings are readily available for the whole campus, then that's when things start to change, and things already have started to change at Southern Miss 100%.
That's incredible. That's so good and heartening to hear. And so I wanted to back up. I meant to ask this earlier. One of the things you said that I loved, that actually made me tear up. You mentioned that the sort of turning point for you of empowerment was hearing that you were believed, right? When that officer said he believed you. Why is it important to grant veracity to survivors in that way? Why was that so empowering for you?
Because it's like, even when you don't have the whole rest of the world saying like, oh, what did you do? Like, what were you wearing? What were the situations? Like, how much did you have to drink? When they're not asking all of that, you're still asking that to yourself. Like, it's been nearly 4 years since this happened, and some days I still literally, I'm like, wait, did I make that up? And no, I didn't make it up. And I'm not the only one that experiences that. I found out. I thought I was the only one that was like, had this imposter syndrome of like, oh, did this really happen to me? Or am I just being dramatic? And I think that has a lot to do with just how women have been treated all throughout time. We're just sort of expected to take it and to not really do much about it. And it's not very, what's the word, promising, or you don't really expect anybody to believe you, if that makes sense. It took me 6 months to tell my parents even what happened to me, and the only reason I did that was because my grades were so bad that semester, and I like that was literally the only reason I did that, was to tell them like, oh, this is why my grades were so bad. Because academic gratification, you know, we love that. But it's just, you don't see justice happen a lot. It's more of sad stories when it comes to sexual assault survivors. Oh, see my dog. So to hear that, it was just like, oh, I can do anything now. Like the chief of UPD just told me that he believed me. So of course, like that was really all I needed to hear. And not saying that I didn't struggle at all throughout that, but that was a very pivotal moment. And I think like I've tried to be a person of that position when people come to me, because one thing about being very open on social media about my story is people love to trauma dump. and I get it, and I've never said, you know, oh, don't talk to me about this. I'm all like, but it can get overwhelming. But the first thing that I say to people that have reached out to me to share, first of all, to share their experience with me makes me feel so great that they would even trust me enough to share that, because it's a big thing to say it out loud, or to even like type it out. Like it's a big thing to admit it and to say, oh, this happened to me, because of all the shame that comes with it. And so the first thing that I try to tell people is like, I believe you. Like, I believe that this happened to you. And that's really the first step with a lot of people to healing, is to have people that love them, or even just strangers, tell them like, I believe what happened to you, and how you are feeling is absolutely warranted. And just to get that assurance, if you will, it's very, very pivotal. Yeah, I've said pivotal a lot, but it is like, it really makes a difference.
Thank you. That was an incredible answer. And I think you encapsulated it so perfectly. So actually, this is a good transition as well. You mentioned earlier when you were blaming yourself, you you thought, what was I wearing? And this seems like a good time to pivot to the what were you wearing exhibit. So talk a little bit about that. Talk about the role you played in it and what the point of it was. I can tell you're excited. Go for it.
Okay, yes. So the What Were You Wearing exhibit, it was one of our events that we put on during April for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I was the committee head, and whenever I was applying for committee heads, because we had so many events, I think there were about 9 total committees, like different event, whatever. But I was back and forth between the What Were You Wearing and I think it was Denim Day. And I talked to Selma, of course, and the What Were You Wearing exhibit made so much sense, just to me personally, because that was a question that I was asked. That was actually something that my rapist attorney pointed out in the Title IX trial. He literally included pictures of me from that night. And so it was very personal. But the What Were You Wearing exhibit, I was trying to find like whatever, I just remember off the top of my head. It first started in 2017 at the University of Kansas, and they have copyright over the event. So when any other university decides to put on that event on their campus, University of Kansas will send us a whole installment packet. And so all of the outfits that were shown at our exhibit and any other What Were You Wearing exhibit are the stories from the original exhibit in Kansas. So when we got the installment packet, it had about 55 different stories, heartbreaking, absolute, like gut-wrenching, from all ages, all genders, and it really hurt to read them, and it was a really difficult process going. It was very, very emotionally tolling, if that's the right way to say it. But our committee ended up getting it down to about 22 stories. And then from that point, we collected donations either from SAPA members or just like ourselves or our partners, because we partnered with the Title IX office, the Schaefer Center, which is a center in Hattiesburg for domestic violence and advocacy in general, and the Center for Resources for Women on campus, and Step In to Step Up. It's another like women-led organization on campus. But we found clothes that matched the descriptions enough, and we hung it up in the student union, which is sort of like kind of like the Commons, I guess, if you want to compare it to like St. Andrews. It's just like the hub sort of everything. So lots of exposure there. In the years before it was in the library in like a room way off in the corner. I had never even like seen the exhibit when it was in the library. So we were able to move locations, which was awesome because so many people saw it and it started so many conversations. And because of COVID, I wanted to do something to include everyone, because not everyone had, I didn't even have classes on campus last semester. So not everyone had classes, not everyone was going to campus. So we created a virtual website and an anonymous Google form for anyone at Southern, or just anyone in general. It didn't have to be at Southern Miss, but for anyone to share their own anonymous experience of what they were wearing when it happened, and it would be featured on a slideshow on the website. And the website's still up. The form has closed, but it's still up. I still look at it from time to time because it makes me really proud, not just of myself, but makes me very proud of all of the people, because it was a lot of people. And the first day we had over 30 responses to the Google form. So it's heartbreaking in that aspect, but it made me very, very proud of all of these people, because even if it's anonymously, that's a lot to do. And anonymous or not, that's going on a website for hundreds of people to see. So that, just to get like that many responses and just to hear about all the buzz it was creating on campus, like people were talking about it in their classes. Like I would have people telling me like, we talked about the exhibit in our class today, and I'm like, shut up, no you didn't. Like and so the whole month it was very empowering, but it was also very triggering at the same time. But it was a very healthy balance of it, because whenever I'd start getting overwhelmed, blah blah blah, just the right time someone would come in and be like, I'm so proud of you, this helped, like this book, like, and that was the best. I'm so proud of that. I think that's like my not biggest accomplishment, but it meant a lot to me.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad that it started the conversation that we wanted it to start. And it did make people uncomfortable, and that was the point, because you can't learn without being uncomfortable. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's how you move forward in things. And like people, I would be like fixing the clothes on the little clothesline, and I'd have strangers come up to me and be like, did you do this? And I'm like, yeah. And it was a little overwhelming sometimes, but like every single person said thank you, and that's what I remember the most, was like people thanking me for this. And like, you don't have to thank me, like but I love it. I really want to do it, like be on that committee again next year. And even if I'm not, like, it's still gonna be, I think like what we did this past April did sort of set the standard for that event. Can't go below what we did after that. Like so I'm excited.
You established your precedent. And so, and real quick, kind of before we pivot again, why is it important? Why was it powerful in these displays to show what women were wearing?
So the way that Bella, they're the president of SAPA, the way that they put it was, when someone asks a survivor, like, what were they wearing, it does nothing to the person asking the question, but it puts boatloads of shame and just embarrassment and confusion on the survivor, because if they were never asked that question before, now they're wondering, oh, was what I was wearing, like, did that have anything to do with it? And sometimes it can be extremely frustrating because, you know, you can ask someone. One of the stories in the exhibit was from a 6-year-old who was wearing Scooby-Doo pajamas. So that was like those outfits. That was sort of like the message to show. You know, there was an army uniform. Like there was a story. She was in the army. Like she had her weapon on her, and it still happened to her. There was one. This guy was wearing his lifeguard uniform. You know, another girl was 12 years old, had just come from her grandfather's funeral. Like it's things like that that really like show to everyone like, damn, this isn't just like girls dressing promiscuously on the street. These are children, and the like not just children, but you know what I mean. Like it's everyday people. It happens in every corner of the world, every corner of your community, and to see that like very glaring, like right in your face, hard to ignore. Very, very difficult to ignore. It was there for 20 days, that exhibit. So there was no ignoring it. And it really had a lot of people having to face that realization, having to, you know, rethink everything that they had once thought about sexual assault and everything in general.
Awesome. Thank you. That was fantastic. And I think that was the most succinctly I've heard it described before, because we have an exhibit set up on Doan's campus as well. I didn't even realize, of course, that it's probably a lot of the same outfits that y'all had for yours, which is, it's really cool. So I wanted to backtrack a little bit. Way early on, you mentioned that part of the goal for SAPA is to have an intersectional framework. Why is intersectionality and inclusion and equity so important to what y'all are doing with sexual assault prevention?
I'm also gonna bring in just my criminal justice knowledge.
Yes, please do.
But in any sort of social justice, criminal justice, sort of like anything like SAPA or anything human related, humanitarian, you have to go about it through an intersectional perspective, because the reality is that the demographic that is most impacted by sexual violence and is least likely to get help are Black women. And like this is sort of getting off topic, but sort of not. I took a human trafficking class last spring, and I did my final research project on an intersectional analysis on the prostitution and commercial sex industry in America as it applies to Black women and young girls of color. And they are the most at risk. LGBTQ teens are the most at risk for sexual violence and suicide. I think the way that Hollywood and just like social media in general has sort of painted sexual violence out to be is people like me, like middle class white women who are educated. Like, and it's, yes, that happens, but in order to make good, like, actual strides and progress, we need to acknowledge the places where these, like the areas or the demographics where these people aren't getting as much help as others. Like equity, you know, like, I was gonna say something else and it just completely left my mind. But we have, we do a lot of training with that too. We have allies training, which is a requirement for membership. I went through that last year, and it's like you think you know everything until you don't. And that, like, you know, I'm not even an LGBTQ ally. I'm in the LGBTQ, but I learned so much from that, and I'm like, dang. Like, I don't know. But yeah, we have the allies training. Like last semester, we did a panel on rape culture and sexual violence within the Black community. and we had a panelist under the we had our panelists were all members of the Southern Miss community, and that like it's panels like that, and then we had another panel on toxic masculinity, and then we had another panel where we had people from Ole Miss and Mississippi State come just to talk about like campus um, campus sexual violence in general. So it's these discussions, like I was saying earlier, that make you uncomfortable, but they are necessary to move forward. You can't move forward without recognizing all of the things that make you uncomfortable. And it can be uncomfortable when like you're a white person in this state right now, not this state, but like, in the state of things right now, learning everything, but that's kind of the point. Like that's literally the point, is to be uncomfortable and work through it. And so SAPA's really helped me learn more about that too, and just not like forcing me to do it, but being in SAPA and doing all of that is, it's like two birds with one stone. That like I'm learning so much about how to help people in the future while also getting to teach people about it too.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. It's this idea that through actually, well, through getting that education and how to educate others, you're learning yourself, but even in the form of like presenting to other people, it just kind of it ingrains that knowledge in you and instills it. So sorry, I always do this with the questions. Oh, okay. So has your work with SAPA influenced your future professional aspirations? I know you mentioned criminal justice.
Yeah, it has a lot. I I've sort of been in this position for the past couple of years where I want to do everything under the sun. I literally want to do everything. And so it's a matter of like, where do I start? And right now, what I want to start with is juvenile justice. And I guess I don't really know if it was necessarily SAPA that made me choose juvenile justice. It was really a class that I took. But I lost my train of thought. I lost my whole.
You're good.
Sorry. Repeat the question.
We were talking about whether or not SAPA. No, you're good. Whether or not SAPA has influenced your future professional aspirations.
Okay. Yeah. It has. Now I remember what I was gonna say. So, for example, Title IX. When I went through my Title IX trial, I did not have to be in the same room as him at any point. We did not directly speak to each other. His attorney was not allowed to directly speak to me. Whenever these hearings happened, we would be in two separate rooms across the floor from each other, connected through Skype. At the time it was Skype because we didn't have Zoom yet. And it's essentially like a conference call, and whatever questions they ask go through the panel, because there's a panel of unbiased faculty members that read through all of, like, they're the ones that basically do the investigation. So they receive the questions and they approve them before they pass it on to me. But now that doesn't happen anymore. The Title IX guidelines have changed. So now the accused can directly question the accuser, which really takes away the whole point of a Title IX investigation. Because just going back to my case, the whole reason I didn't report to HPD was I didn't want to go through a criminal trial. Like that, a criminal trial, the way that they show it on TV, it's kind of similar. Maybe not like all the legal parts of it, but it's very, very traumatizing, and I just didn't want to do that. And Rusty Keys, the guy that I met with, he was very honest with me. He said it's been a year. It's going to be a he said, she said. Not sure if criminal case will be the best option. but Title IX is an option. And so that's essentially the whole reason that I did Title IX, was because I knew I would never have to see him face to face. Like, it took away that whole trauma of being in the courtroom and facing your accuser, essentially. And now that's taken away, which really grinds my gears and really makes me want to get into policy, like policy work. That's sort of what Selma, the founder, is really trying to do too. Like I said, she's in DC, but being in SAPA has just made me realize how broken our government is, and just our society in general, because the society affects the law.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to change it. It makes me literally just want to go into all of this legislation and just, oh, typo, let's take that out and put this. Like I took a criminal law class last semester, and rape shield laws essentially don't exist. There are so many, like, rape shield laws were put into place really as just like a performative action. Is there are so many ways to get around rape shield laws in criminal trials. You know, you can find so many ways to bring up a survivor's past actions and make them look however, and all of these things have just been highlighted in SAPA and through my coursework, and I want to change it. Like, I'm sick of it.
No, absolutely. And well, actually, there is one thing I want to ask about that I think is really interesting, that a lot of people who maybe don't have the criminal law background might not understand. Why is it so important to change this through policy rather than trying to change it through social initiatives?
Because to be real, you know, these policies and this legislation and these statutes were written by white men. They were not written by people who typically have to experience this. And when these laws are written, no matter like what state, hardly ever do they get the input from actual survivors. And there are just so many loopholes in all of these laws. Like, you know, rape in the first, sexual battery, like aggravated, like there are just so many things, and they have so many different sentences or punishment, and half the time they don't mean anything. Like Brock Turner, for example, he's literally in my criminal law textbook as an example of how our law fails survivors of sexual assault, because this man got 6 months because he was a cool swimmer. Nice, whatever. But, and then, which like highlights another thing, kind of getting off topic.
No, not at all.
Brock Turner gets 6 months, and then a black man who has same accusation, life, or maybe not life, but you know.
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating, because the people, like going back to what I said earlier, the people that are writing all these laws and all these policies are people that do not represent America. They do not represent the general population. They represent the top 5%, and that's really it. And so we need people writing these laws and these new statutes that do represent the people that they're writing it for. Yeah. And to get the input, because nobody's done that.
Right. Well, and I think that harkens back to something else that you emphasized earlier, which is intersectionality, right? Getting the input of groups that have been historically disadvantaged.
And historically excluded from like anything. I like that. I heard that term, historically excluded, like weeks ago, and I've started to try to say that more, like historically excluded, because that's like, you don't want to say, I don't know, I lost my train of thought. I was just really saying I like that term, historically excluded.
No, and I think it's a little different from disadvantage too, because the connotation is different, right? Because disadvantage signifies that there was at least some recognition, some effort made, even if it was, you know, surface level, to recognize them. Whereas exclusion is like what you were talking about earlier with sexual assault policy. is like the narrative of people who are actually being sexually assaulted most often have been wholly excluded,
Yeah.
and the input has too. Well, that was fantastic, and I really love talking about policy. That's a pretty exciting framework for all this. Just to wrap up a little bit, and I know you mentioned earlier you didn't have an exact answer for this necessarily, but what's on the horizon for both SAPA and for yourself?
For myself, I will be graduating in May. I will start applying to grad school soon, looking for jobs. I really want to work in Chicago. The ultimate goal is to get into grad school in Chicago and work for a nonprofit, something with disadvantaged, or not disadvantaged, historically excluded, communities. Like that's, I feel like I'm not doing anything right now. Like I'm studying all of this stuff, but it's like I want to get there and I want to do it. So really hoping for that. Chicago is really the ultimate goal. And for SAPA, we're just starting out, like getting used to being back in person. Because all last year, all of our events were through Zoom, all of our meetings and everything. So we're getting acclimated into being back on campus because there are so many people on campus, and like it really freaked me out first week of school because I forgot how many people went to Southern Miss. When I was like, y'all need to drop your classes. I can't find any parking. But we do have a panel coming up in October. I think it's either the first or second week in October, and it does focus on rape culture, and there will be representatives from SGA, like Southern Miss, SGA, SAPA, and a few other organizations. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. They still have to pick these panelists. I think they said the date was October 13th. Let's see. Yeah, I think it is October 13th. But that will be via Zoom, and anybody and everybody is welcome to join that. They'll definitely be posting about it on SAPA's social media. So if anybody wants to follow that, it's usm.sapa on Instagram.
Oh, and that'll be tagged in the caption as well. We'll give y'all a little plug. Despite the fact that our sort of sphere of influence is limited, but well, before I let you go, do you have any last word of advice just for, leaders coming up, whether it be in my university's community, your community, just in general?
I think the biggest thing is if you see something, say something, whether it be sexual harassment or sexual violence or just something toxic that your friend says. Like, I think that's the ultimate thing for leadership is if you see something that doesn't align with your morals or your values, say something, because you never know how that might affect or how that might affect the situation. I'm a big believer in that. I don't think that anything, I think you should call people out when they're being disrespectful or they're being not cool. That makes sense. But I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely fantastic, and that's what we really want to impart people with the sexual assault prevention work we do on our campus as well, and just the importance of doing something.
Y'all have like a group like SAPA sort of?
Yeah, I'm actually I work it's our campus advocacy prevention education program, and it's pretty similar to what y'all do. Actually, we lead workshops and a lot of the same stuff actually. But I'm gonna stop recording here. Hang on.